Welcome to the Philosophical Odysseys podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
So, I want to start this deep dive with a bit of a cliche, like one of the oldest philosophical riddles in the book.
Oh boy, let me guess. The tree.
You know it. If a tree falls in a forest, right, and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound?
Right, the classic.
And for decades, the standard scientific answer has basically been, well, yes, obviously.
Yeah, of course it does.
Right. It displaces air, it creates sound waves, it alters the physical environment. Like the physical event occurs whether you're actually standing there or not.
Exactly. It's just physics.
But if you look at how human society actually operates today, like how we consume news or how we argue on the internet or even how we define our own identities, the practical answer seems to be who cares?
Yeah. Seriously, who cares?
Like, unless someone is there to record it, tweet about it, argue about it, and, assign a whole narrative to it, the fallen tree might as well not even exist.
That is a terrifyingly accurate way to frame it.
Right. So today, we are embarking on a deep dive into this massive stack of research that forces us to look at this profound and honestly kind of terrifying gap.
The gap between the physical tree falling and the story we tell about it.
Exactly. We are officially dissecting the difference between reality and truth.
And I mean, this is a distinction that sits at the very bedrock of human civilization. It really does.
For sure.
When you fail to separate those two concepts, the whole architecture of how we understand the world just, it begins to crumble.
So I want to frame the stakes for you, the listener, right out of the gate here. Think about the casual conversations you have literally every day.
Right.
You hear a wild rumor at the office and you ask, really? Or someone gives you a sketchy excuse and you ask, truthfully.
Yeah, we toss those words around as if they're just perfect synonyms.
Exactly. We treat them like, I don't know, two different brands of bottled water. Like different labels, but the exact same liquid inside.
But the research we're unpacking today, which is drawn from just a sweeping array of disciplines, reveals that treating reality and truth as identical concepts is not just a semantic error.
No.
It's a massive cognitive trap. And it generally pushes us into one of two very dangerous extremes.
Let's talk about those extremes. The first one being this kind of aggressive, arrogant subjectivity.
Yes. The belief that whatever I experience, whatever my personal viewpoint happens to be, is the absolute, unvarnished reality of the universe.
We see this constantly, right? People look at the world through this incredibly narrow keyhole of their own biases.
Oh, all the time.
Their own upbringing, their own highly specific emotional state. And they just declare, my truth is the objective reality. And if you disagree with my truth, well, you're just denying reality.
Which is just a fundamental misunderstanding of what the human brain is actually capable of doing.
Right.
It assumes we're these objective cameras, which we emphatically are not.
Not even close. But then the other extreme is equally paralyzing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. The relativistic trap.
Yes, the cynical burnout phase. This is where we look at all the competing narratives, all the different quote-unquote truths clashing out there in the public square, and we throw our hands up.
We just say, well, everyone has their own truth.
Right. It's all subjective.
Right.
So reality doesn't even exist. Nothing matters. Everything is just an illusion.
It's total epistemological nihilism.
Yeah.
I mean, if everything is just a story, then no story has any weight at all.
Exactly. And that is why the material we're diving into is so vital. We're going to trace this fault line across human history.
We're looking at the etymology of the words themselves, going through ancient and modern philosophy.
We're going to examine how science tries to navigate this gap and look at the sociology and psychology of how our brains actively manufacture the world we live in.
Yeah, we'll even touch on how the legal system and the art world completely rely on this exact tension.
Because the core insight here, the big aha moment that leaps out of these sources, is that the friction between what is real and what is true is not some bug in the human operating system.
No, it's the engine.
It's the engine. It's the very thing that generates art, scientific discovery, and societal progress.
So let's go back to the very beginning.
Yes, let's do it.
Because before we can date the high-minded philosophy of Immanuel Kant or, the mechanics of modern social media algorithms, we have to look at the raw materials of human communication.
We need to look at how ancient humans first managed to conceptualize the physical world versus the mental world.
Right, because language is basically fossilized thought. If you want to know how our ancestors viewed the universe, you just look at the roots of their vocabulary.
That makes a lot of sense.
The etymological map of reality and truth is incredibly revealing. It shows two entirely different human priorities.
So let's examine the concept of reality first.
Okay, So if we look at the linguistic history, specifically ancient Turkic languages, the root word for reality comes from the ancient verb kert.
K-E-R-T, right? I found this so fascinating because kert wasn't this abstract philosophical concept. It was a physical action.
A very violent, deliberate physical action, yeah. Kert literally meant to notch, to carve, or to leave a permanent mark.
Oh.
Imagine an ancient herdsman, right? Carving a tally mark into a wooden staff to count as livestock, or notching a stone to mark a dead.
Okay.
The linguistic origin of reality is completely tied to undeniable physical existence. It's an action that alters the material world.
And it leaves a trace that persists independently of the person who made it. Like, the notch remains even if the carver dies.
Exactly. It's the ultimate proof of existence. You can physically run your thumb over the notch. It is undeniably there.
And what's wild is we see this exact same physical grounding in Western languages, too, like the Latin root res, which is the direct ancestor of our English word reality.
Right.
It didn't mean a conceptual framework at all.
No, res strictly meant a concrete physical object.
Yeah.
In Roman law and daily life, res referred to matters of fact, property, tangible wealth, the stuff you could touch, trade, defend, and tax.
So across these entirely different language families, the foundational concept of reality is anchored in atoms, mass, and physics.
It is the indifferent physical stuff of the universe.
Okay, so I want you to hold that tangible physical notch in your mind, because the linguistic origin of truth comes from a completely different universe.
Totally different. It has absolutely nothing to do with wood or stone or property.
Right, it has to do with the invisible bonds between people.
Exactly. If we look at the Arabic root for truth, which gave rise to various terms in Middle Eastern philosophy and language, it originally revolved around protecting sacred social values.
It was essentially about duty, right?
Exactly that. In pre-Islamic and classical Arabic society, defending the era meant defending your loyalty, maintaining your honor, keeping your promises.
Wow.
It was about standing by your word and protecting the banner of your community. It was this a deeply moral, relational concept.
It wasn't about whether a physical object existed.
No, it was about whether a human being was reliable.
And the parallel in English is just stunning. The old Germanic root trewa, which is obviously where we get the word truth,
Right.
it literally meant loyalty and faith. It meant being true to a vow, a pledge, or a person. Like that old archaic phrase to pledge one's troth.
Yeah, the birthplace of truth wasn't in a laboratory measuring the physical world. Its birthplace was infidelity. It was the measure of a person's character, not a physical object.
That is such a huge distinction.
It is. It was only over centuries of intellectual development that truth evolved to mean the mind's accurate correspondence to a physical situation. But its DNA is entirely social and moral.
Okay, so here's a visual to anchor this for you listening, because it's a metaphor we are going to carry through this entire deep dive.
Let's hear it.
Picture a massive ancient oak tree out in a field. Reality is a deep notch carved into the bark of that tree with an axe. The notch is physical.
It's subject to the laws of biology and physics.
Exactly. It exists whether you are looking at it, ignoring it, or actively denying it. The tree does not care about your feelings. The notch is simply an ontological fact.
A fact of existence.
Right. But truth is the sacred oath that two people swore to each other while standing under the shade of that tree.
That's beautifully put.
You cannot weigh the oath. You can't measure its mass. You cannot carve it out of the bark. It exists entirely in the shared mental and moral space of the human beings involved.
That captures the fundamental split perfectly. The notch is indifferent. The oath is deeply human.
Yeah.
And if we elevate this from just etymology to formal philosophy, we are looking at the two great pillars of human inquiry here. Reality is the domain of ontology.
The study of what actually is, right? The inventory of the universe.
Exactly. And truth is the domain of epistemology, the study of how we know what is, the judgments we make, and the meaning we assign to that inventory.
So reality is the stage, the wood, the nails, the velvet curtains. Truth is the play we put on that stage. Yeah. And the grand human struggle is that we're constantly, desperately trying to make sure our play actually reflects the stage it's being performed on. We want our oaths to match the notches.
Which leads us perfectly into the minds of the people who dedicated their lives to mapping this gap. How did the greatest thinkers in history articulate the separation between the physical world and the mind?
Let's get into it. Several brilliant contemporary philosophers we drew upon for this research establish a razor-sharp baseline for this.
They do. They argue that reality must be understood as completely independent of human consciousness.
Right.
And to test this, you just run a simple thought experiment. If a sudden cosmic event instantly erased every human being, every animal, every conscious observer from the Earth tomorrow, reality would not skip a beat.
The tectonic plates would still shift?
Yep. The oceans would still have tides dictated by the moon's gravity. Hydrogen atoms would still bond with oxygen atoms. Reality requires no audience.
The universe just keeps humming along.
Exactly. But truth would instantly vanish.
Whoa, wait, vanish entirely?
Yes. Because truth is the reflection of that reality inside a consciousness. Truth is a parasite, and I mean that in a structural sense, not a negative one.
Sure, sure.
It requires a host. It requires a mind to perceive the raw data of reality, process it, categorize it, and make a judgment about it. Truth is the delicate alignment between the chaotic physical world out there and the conceptual models inside our heads.
Okay, let's ground this in a very tactile example from the sources. Think about a pen. Like, if you have a pen sitting on your desk right now, consider the physical object.
Right.
The collection of carbon molecules, the specific polymers of the plastic casing, the heavy metals in the tip, all taking up specific coordinates in space and time. That collection of atoms is a reality. It's an ontological fact.
It is a thing in itself. It possesses no self-awareness at all.
Right. The pen doesn't know it's a pen. The universe doesn't have a built-in category labeled pens. But when you walk into the room, your brain looks at that specific arrangement of atoms. Your consciousness groups them together, retrieves a concept from your memory, and assigns the label writing instrument.
Yes.
The concept in your mind, and how perfectly that concept matches the physical utility of the object on the desk that is truth. The reality is atoms. The truth is penness.
Penness, I love that. And that example is very safe and objective, right?
Right.
But the sources push us toward a much more visceral human example to show how wide this gap can actually become.
Yeah, the illness example. This one hit me really hard. It clarifies the stakes so well.
It really does. So imagine a patient in a hospital bed. The reality of their situation is entirely biological and physical. It's
Right.
cellular destruction.
Right.
A pathogen is invading tissue. White blood cells are dying in defense. Core body temperature is rising. Lung capacity is dropping.
Yeah.
That is the ontological reality.
It's just a series of chemical and biological events playing out according to the laws of nature.
Yes. It is brutal, but it's entirely devoid of inherent meaning.
But the patient is not just a biological vessel. The patient is a human being, which means they are a relentless meaning-making machine.
Exactly.
They cannot simply experience cellular destruction. They have to interpret it.
The human mind just abhors a vacuum of meaning. So the patient actively constructs a narrative around that biological reality.
Right.
One patient might interpret the illness as a profound spiritual test, a crucible designed to burn away their superficial attachments and bring them closer to the divine.
Yeah.
But another patient might view the exact same biological reality as a cruel cosmic punishment for past mistakes.
Or another might see it purely as an absurd, random stroke of terrible luck, just chaos.
And here is the crucial point. That deeply held, visceral narrative, whether it's a spiritual awakening or a feeling of cosmic betrayal, that narrative is the truth they live in. It is their constructed reality.
But their truth does not alter the physical reality of the viral replication by one single cell.
Not one. The virus doesn't care about their spiritual journey.
Exactly. But at the same time, the physical reality of the virus is utterly meaningless and, frankly, utterly unlivable without the truth the patient wraps around it.
That is the human condition in a nutshell right there. We are biological organisms trapped in reality, but we are conscious beings who only know how to breathe the oxygen of truth.
The oxygen of truth. Wow.
And philosophers have been trying to map the boundary between those two atmospheres for literally millennia. If we trace the historical evolution of this anxiety, all roads really lead back to ancient Greece.
Oh, we definitely have to talk about Plato's cave. I mean, it is the foundational metaphor for everything we are discussing today.
It absolutely is. So in a republic, Plato asks us to imagine a group of prisoners who have been chained inside a dark cave since birth.
Right.
Their heads are locked in place. They can only stare at the blank rock wall in front of them. Behind them is a roaring fire. And between the fire and the prisoners, there's a parade of objects constantly moving.
Like statues, animals, shapes.
Yes. And the fire casts the shadows of these objects onto the wall the prisoners are facing. Because these shadows are the only things the prisoners have ever seen, they naturally assume the shadows are the absolute total reality of the universe.
Obviously, they don't know anything else.
Right. They name the shadows, they study the shadows, they build their entire understanding of existence around this two-dimensional darkness.
And the philosophical kick in the teeth is that Plato is saying to the reader, you are the prisoner, we are the prisoners.
Yes.
Everything we see, touch, and measure in our daily lives, our wealth, our physical bodies, our societal status, these are just the shadows. They are fleeting, degrading illusions.
Plato argued that the true light, the eternal, unchanging forms of reality, exist entirely outside the cave. They're beyond our immediate sensory grasp. And this is deeply tied to the Greek concept of truth, which is encapsulated in the word aletheia.
Aletheia, I love the literal translation of this word.
It's beautiful. It literally translates to unconcealment, or the act of removing the veil.
Removing the veil?
Yeah. It combines the prefix a, meaning not, and lethe, meaning forgetfulness or concealment. It's the same root as the river Lethe in the underworld, the river of forgetting.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So for the ancient Greeks, truth was not simply stating a correct fact like, the sky is blue. Truth was a heroic, painful action.
It was the struggle of breaking your chains.
Exactly. Turning away from the comforting shadows and dragging yourself out of the cave to see the blinding, raw reality of the sun. Truth was an awakening.
Which means truth is difficult. It implies that our default state, our comfortable everyday existence, is a state of concealment.
Yes. And as human thought progressed, this idea that the mind and the material world were somewhat distinct really hardened into an absolute architectural divide. We see this vividly during the golden age of Islamic philosophy.
Right, because thinkers in this era were deeply engaged with those Greek texts, but they refined them and sharpened the concepts immensely.
They did. Al-Kindi is a great starting point here.
Yeah, Al-Kindi.
Often called the first of the great Islamic philosophers. He approached this with incredible precision. He argued that the physical object out in the world is just matter. The truth of a thing, however, only exists when the human intellect successfully grasps its complete, rational definition.
So you don't possess the truth of a horse just by looking at a horse?
No, you possess the truth when your mind comprehends the essence, form, and cause of the horse.
Okay, I see. But the thinker who really took an axe and chopped the universe cleanly in two was Avicenna, or Ibn Sina.
No, Ibn Sina performed a philosophical separation that still reverberates today. He looked at the physical world and the mental world and essentially erected a firewall between them.
A firewall?
Yeah. He argued that every object possesses a dual existence. There is its special existence, its physical, concrete reality out in the material world, but then there is its existence in the mind.
Right.
And Ibn Sina was adamant that while a perfect truth in your mind might correspond to the physical object, the mental image and the physical object are fundamentally, irreversibly different modes of being. You cannot merge them.
The thought of a fire does not burn your mind.
Exactly. The map is not the territory.
Ibn Sina established that our minds are completely distinct arenas from the physical universe, which perfectly sets the stage for the ultimate, absolute boss fight in the history of epistemology.
Oh, here we go.
The thinker who took this separation and pushed it to a level of almost terrifying logical extremity, Immanuel Kant.
Kant, the 18th century philosopher who basically told humanity you are never, ever getting out of the cave.
Seriously.
Kant executed what he called his Copernican revolution in philosophy. Before Kant, philosophers generally assumed that our minds passively reflect the objects in the world, like a mirror.
Right.
Kant flipped it entirely. He argued that the objects in the world must conform to the structure of our minds. To explain this, he divided the entire universe of existence into two absolute categories, the phenomenon and the noumenon.
Okay, let's take our time here and really unpack these, because they sound like terms from a high-concept sci-fi novel, but they are the keys to understanding modern thought. Let's start with the phenomenon.
So the phenomenon is the world as it appears to us. It is the world of human experience. Everything you can see, hear, taste, touch, and measure belongs to the phenomenal realm.
Okay.
But Kant's vital insight was that this experience is heavily filtered. Human beings are born with a specific cognitive operating system. We can only process data through certain built-in categories, the most important of these being space, time, and causality.
So wait, space and time aren't necessarily real things floating out in the universe. They are just the software our brains use to organize the data.
Precisely. If you don't organize the universe into a sequence of before and after, which is time, and here and there, which is space, human consciousness cannot function.
It would just be meaningless, blinding static.
Exactly. So the phenomenal world, the world we interact with, the world of science and daily life, is a heavily processed, human-specific construct. It is our truth.
I like to think of it like wearing a highly advanced virtual reality headset. Let's say you were born wearing an Apple Vision Pro, and it is physically fused to your skull.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
You can never take it off. The headset takes the invisible Wi-Fi signals and raw code of the universe and renders it into beautiful 3D shapes, colors, and sounds that you can interact with. The world you experience inside the headset is the phenomenon.
That is a brilliant modern translation of Kant. I love that. And what is outside the headset? The raw code, the invisible Wi-Fi signals. That is the noumenon.
The thing in itself.
Yes, the noumenon is the ultimate reality. It is the universe as it exists completely independently of human perception. It is reality stripped of the filters of space, time, and human causality.
Okay.
And here is Kant's devastating, monumental conclusion. Human beings can never directly access the noumenon.
Never.
It is biologically and cognitively impossible. Because the very second you try to observe the noumenon, you are forcing it through the filters of your senses. You're forcing it into space and time. You instantly turn it back into a phenomenon.
So you can never take the headset off. You can never see the raw code of the universe.
Never. We are forever trapped in the phenomenal world of our own construction.
Okay, I have to step in and push back on this.
Go for it.
Because reading this gave me a sense of genuine philosophical claustrophobia. If Kant is right, if we can never ever touch the raw reality of the thing in itself isn't truth, just a collective hallucination.
Well,
Let's go back to my cup of coffee on the desk. The heat, the brown color, the bitter taste. Kant says those are just phenomenal experiences generated by my human headset. I can never know the real noumenal coffee.
right.
If that's the case, does reality even matter? Are we just floating in a void, agreeing to share the same illusions?
You're echoing the exact existential dread that Kant's philosophy triggered across Europe. I mean, if we are completely cut off from raw reality, epistemology threatens to collapse into total subjective relativism.
Yeah.
Because if I can't touch reality, then my truth is just as valid as your truth, even if they contradict, because neither of us can check the source code.
It feels like a recipe for madness.
It really does.
Yeah.
But our sources provide the antidote. They point us to a mathematical and logical lifeline that pulls epistemology out of that terrifying void.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. In the 1930s, the brilliant Polish logician Alfred Tarski formulated what is known as the semantic theory of truth, or the correspondence theory. And he anchored it with a formula so beautifully simple, it almost sounds like a joke.
The famous snow is white formula.
Yes. Tarski stated, the statement, snow is white, is a true statement if and only if the physical reality of snow is actually white.
I remember reading that and thinking, well, obviously, why did it take a genius logician to write that down?
I know, it sounds like a tautology. But structurally, it is a profound philosophical maneuver. Look at what Tarski is doing. The phrase in quotation marks, snow is white, is a linguistic mental construct. It is a sentence.
Right. It exists only in the mind. That is epistemology.
Exactly. But he links it inextricably to the physical universe outside the quotation marks, the actual physical snow falling from the sky. That is ontology.
He is building a bridge between the headset and the raw code.
He is creating an anchor chain. Tarski is admitting that, yes, our truths are mental constructs. They are maps we draw in our heads. But he insists that the validity of our maps is entirely dependent on the external territory.
Yeah, okay. I see.
The raw reality outside our perception might be filtered, it might be mysterious, but it still exerts a harsh, restrictive force on what we are allowed to believe.
Because if I sit here and construct a mental model that says, snow is neon green, I can believe that all I want, but the second I try to apply that truth to the physical universe, reality rejects the correspondence. The universe just says no.
Exactly. Think about how crucial this is in the age of artificial intelligence. We talk constantly about AI hallucinations. What is an AI hallucination?
Right, it's just making things up.
It is when a large language model generates a perfectly grammatical, highly confident sentence, a mental construct that has absolutely zero correspondence to the physical reality of the world.
It generates truth without the anchor of reality.
Precisely. Tarski's formula proves that human beings are not just hallucinating. Even if we are wearing Kant's VR headset of human perception, we keep bumping our shins into the hard furniture of the room.
And the furniture is reality.
Yes. Tarski proves that our mental maps are mathematically and logically grounded by the bruises on our shins. We are navigating a real territory, even if we are mapping it in the dark.
The map is not the territory, but a good map must correspond to the territory. That synthesis is incredibly satisfying.
It really is.
But it brings us directly to the next massive arena of our deep dive. Because the philosophy leaves us grappling in the dark, building maps through trial and error. A lot of people listening are probably screaming at their devices right now.
Oh, I'm sure they are. What about science?
Exactly. Science isn't fumbling in the dark. Science is the giant spotlight that illuminates the territory.
That is the narrative we are all taught from grade school. Science is presented as the ultimate, objective catalog of reality. But when you step into the philosophy of science, you realize that assumption is fiercely, brutally contested. Science is not a simple catalog. It is an active war zone where the battle between what is real and what is true is fought every single day.
And the two main armies clashing on this battlefield are scientific realism and instrumentalism. Let's start with the defenders of the spotlight. Scientific realism.
Right.
This is the intuitive camp for most of us. This is the belief that when science works, it is because it is giving us a literal, perfectly accurate picture of Kant's raw noumenon.
Yes. A scientific realist argues that the vocabulary of science, words like electron, magnetic field, DNA, are not just convenient metaphors. They are literal descriptions of the invisible architecture of the universe.
And their most devastating weapon in this debate is a concept formulated by the philosopher Hilary Putnam known as the no miracles argument.
I love this argument because it appeals to pure common sense.
It is incredibly persuasive.
It really is.
Yeah.
Putnam essentially says, look at the staggering success of modern science. We are manipulating things that are completely unobservable to the naked eye. We are splitting atoms. We are mapping the human genome.
We're bouncing signals off satellites to pinpoint your exact GPS location on a phone in your pocket.
Right. Now, Putnam argues, if these unobservable entities, the electrons, the radio waves, the double helix, were not real, if they were just mental fictions or helpful little stories we told ourselves,
Yeah.
then the fact that our smartphones work, that MRI machines can scan our brains, that antibiotics cure bacterial infections would be a literal, inexplicable miracle. It would be magic.
It makes perfect sense. If the invisible physics wasn't a physical reality, my phone shouldn't be able to stream this audio right now. The sheer, undeniable success of the technology proves the reality of the invisible science beneath it.
The realist says, we aren't just making useful maps, we are literally reading the mind of the universe.
It is a powerful stance. But encamped on the other side of the battlefield, we have the instrumentalists.
Yeah, the skeptics.
Yes. And they look at the exact same history of science and arrive at a completely different, almost subversive conclusion. The instrumentalists look at the no miracles argument and say, hold on a minute, let's look at the historical record.
Exactly. Instrumentalists point out that the history of science is essentially a graveyard of incredibly successful theories that turned out to be completely, fundamentally false in their description of reality.
The classic, undeniable example is the Ptolemaic system of astronomy.
Yes, the geocentric model, where the Earth is stationary at the center of the universe and everything revolves around us.
Right. For over 1,000 years, the smartest minds on the planet used Ptolemy's model. They used complex mathematical constructs called epicycles to explain the movement of the stars and planets.
And here is the kicker. It worked beautifully.
It did.
Yeah, you could use the Ptolemaic system to accurately predict a solar eclipse. You could use it to navigate ships across oceans. It was an incredibly successful scientific theory.
So it had massive predictive power.
But it was completely lacking in reality. The Earth is not the center of the universe. The epicycles did not exist in the physical noumenon. It was a complete ontological fiction.
Wow.
So instrumentalists argue success does not imply reality. A scientific theory is not a literal absolute truth about the universe. It is just a tool, an instrument.
Hence the name.
Yes, an instrumentalist says we shouldn't burden science with the philosophical demand of finding absolute truth. That's a fool's errand. We should only ask one question of a theory. Does it work?
Does it have predictive power?
Does it solve the engineering problem in front of us? If yes, it's a good tool. Whether it accurately reflects the ultimate invisible reality of the cosmos is largely irrelevant.
To make this concrete, I always think of instrumentalism like using a public transit map. If you look in the famous map of the London Underground or the New York subway map, it is not a true geographic representation of the city.
Not at all.
The distances between stations are totally wrong. The jagged train lines are smoothed out into perfect straight lines and 45-degree angles. The geography of the surface world above is wildly distorted. It is not reality.
No. If you tried to walk the city using the subway map as a scale guide, you would be hopelessly lost.
But if your goal is just to navigate the underground system, if you just need to get from point A to point B, that map is flawless.
Right.
It has absolute predictive utility. It gives you the truth of navigation without burdening you with the sheer complexity of the absolute reality of the geography. The subway map is an instrument.
That is the perfect encapsulation of instrumentalism.
Yeah.
Science provides the subway map of the universe.
Yeah.
But this debate over what science actually achieves took its most dramatic turn in the 20th century. And it requires us to look at a massive intellectual collision between a group known as the logical positivists and a philosopher named Karl Popper.
The logical positivists, these were the hardcore, no-nonsense empiricists of the early 1900s, right? The Vienna Circle.
They were the ultimate purists. The positivists looked at the messy philosophical debates about reality and truth and decided to clean house. They declared war on ambiguity.
How so?
They established a doctrine stating that the only things that are real, the only statements that have any meaning whatsoever, are things that can be strictly empirically verified.
So if you can't see it, touch it, measure it, and prove it in a laboratory, it doesn't exist. It's just metaphysical poetry.
Exactly. They wanted to build a fortress of absolute verifiable truths. And their method for doing this was inductive accumulation. You observe the world, you gather positive evidence, and you build a truth.
The classic example is the swan. I go to the lake, I see a white swan. I go to another lake, I see another white swan.
Right.
I spend 20 years traveling the northern hemisphere, and I document 10,000 white swans. Therefore, I declare the verified scientific truth. All swans are white.
And the positivists believed that by piling up enough positive observations, you could cement a theory into absolute reality. But then Karl Popper enters the fray and completely detonates the foundation of their fortress.
Oh, wow.
Popper revolutionizes our understanding of science by pointing out a devastating, inescapable flaw in the positivist logic.
What was the flaw?
Popper pointed out that you can never verify a universal claim.
Never. Wait, never.
You can observe 10,000 white swans. You can observe 10 million white swans over 10 centuries. But the statement, all swans are white, is still not a verified absolute truth because you haven't seen all the swans that will ever exist. And all it takes is for you to take one trip to Australia and observe one single solitary black swan, and your entire theory built on centuries of positive evidence is instantly destroyed.
It's a staggering asymmetry. No amount of positive evidence can ever prove a theory universally true. But a single piece of negative evidence can definitively prove it false.
This was Popper's genius. He realized that the positivists had it backward. Science does not operate on the principle of verifiability. It operates on the principle of falsifiability.
Explain the difference, because this is the cornerstone of modern scientific literacy.
Falsifiability means that for a theory to be considered scientific, it must make predictions that can be tested and potentially proven wrong.
Right.
If a theory is so vague or flexible that no possible evidence could ever contradict it, it isn't science, it's dogma. Science doesn't advance by hoarding absolute truths and fiercely protecting them. Science advances by ruthlessly, violently trying to murder its own theories.
We make a bold, highly specific guess about reality, a hypothesis, and then we spend years designing experiments trying to break it.
Yes, and the theories that survive the gauntlet, the ones we haven't been able to destroy yet, are not elevated to the status of absolute reality. They are simply the best surviving models we have at this particular moment in time.
So if science isn't giving us absolute reality, what is the goal? Are we just spinning our wheels?
Not at all. Popper gave us a beautiful concept called verisimilitude.
Verisimilitude.
It means truth-likeness or approximation. Think of science as an asymptotic curve on a graph, constantly approaching a line but never quite touching it. Through the brutal process of falsification, we are constantly shedding false truths. We are stripping away errors. With every discarded theory, we get closer and closer to the raw noumenon, the true reality.
That makes sense.
We never claim to hold the final truth, but the process ensures we are getting less wrong over time.
That is a profoundly humbling but optimistic view of science. It's a mechanism for getting less wrong. But here's the massive, unavoidable problem that the research forces us to confront next. Science is an ideal, rigorous framework, but science is conducted by human beings. And human beings are not objective measuring devices. We are highly subjective, deeply emotional, tribal creatures operating with incredibly flawed biological hardware.
We certainly are.
Which brings us to the next phase of our journey, the mind and the masses. If science is a disciplined effort to weed out errors, how do our own brains and our societies actively conspire to invent our own realities?
This is where we have to leave the clean, logical realm of the philosophy of science and wade into the messy, startling realities of cognitive science and sociology.
Gets weird here.
It really does, because the fundamental error we make in daily life is believing that human perception is passive.
We think our eyes are video cameras and our ears are microphones, just cleanly recording the reality out there.
Exactly, and cognitive science has proven that this is a total fallacy. Perception is an incredibly active, aggressive, constructive process.
Right.
Think about your brain. It is locked inside a pitch-black, silent vault of bone, your skull. It has no direct access to the outside world. All it receives is a chaotic storm of electrical impulses from your optic nerves, your eardrums, and your nerve endings.
And from that meaningless static, your brain has to urgently guess what is happening outside so it can keep you alive.
It is a prediction engine.
It's a prediction engine.
And because the raw data is overwhelming, the brain takes massive shortcuts. It heavily relies on past experiences, context, and expectations to build a functional model of the world in real time. And we can easily prove that this model prioritizes a smooth truth over an accurate reality.
The classic proof here is visual illusions. They aren't just parlor tricks. They are exposing the bugs in the software.
Precisely. Consider the famous checkerboard shadow illusion created by Edward Adelson. You look at an image of a checkerboard with a cylinder resting on it, casting a shadow.
I know this one.
There's a dark square outside the shadow and a light square inside the shadow. To your conscious mind, they look completely different. One is dark gray, one is light gray. That is your perceived truth.
But if you isolate the pixels on a computer screen,
the physical reality is that both squares are the exact same shade of gray.
It's infuriating. Even when you know they are the same color, you literally cannot force your brain to see them that way. Your brain overrides reality.
Because your brain is processing the context. It understands how shadows work in the real world. It calculates that a surface inside a shadow must be lighter than it appears, so it actively alters your perception to make the image make sense logically.
Your brain sacrifices the raw reality of the pixels to give you a contextual truth that usually keeps you safe in a 3D environment.
Yes.
So even our baseline sensory input is a manufactured narrative, but it gets exponentially more disturbing when we move from real-time perception to memory. I was reading the psychological studies on this in our source material, and it induces genuine vertigo.
It really does.
We tend to view memory like a digital file system. Something happens, we record the video, we put it in a folder, and years later, we open the folder and watch the video again.
And that metaphor is entirely false. Memory is not a recording. It is a live reconstruction. Every single time you recall a memory, you are rebuilding it from scratch in your neural pathways.
It's like a Wikipedia page that your brain is constantly secretly editing.
That is a terrifyingly accurate analogy, because every time you access that memory, you inevitably weave in your current emotional state, new information you've learned since the event, and your current biases. You overwrite the file.
Which means that our most deeply held, emotional, vivid memories, the things we would confidently swear to in a court of law as the absolute objective reality, might have drifted completely away from what actually happened.
They are neurologically bounded. We are trapped in models of our own making.
Okay, so on an individual biological level, our brains are actively constructing models that deviate from raw reality. But what happens when you take thousands or millions of these flawed, model-building brains and force them to live together?
Then you scale the hallucination.
Wow.
You get the sociological phenomenon known as the social construction of reality. To understand this, our sources rely heavily on a monumental text by sociologists Peter Berger and Thomas Luckman. In the 1960s, they meticulously mapped out exactly how human societies invent concepts out of thin air, and then collectively forget that they invented them, treating them instead as undeniable laws of nature.
They described a three-step cycle, right? Walk us through the mechanics of this, because once you see this cycle, you start seeing it everywhere in your life.
The cycle has three phases: externalization, objectification, and internalization. Let's trace it using a universally understood example. Let's look at the concept of money.
Perfect. Let's say we are an ancient tribe on an island relying entirely on bartering. I have fish, you have woven baskets.
Exactly. Step one is externalization. As the tribe grows, bartering becomes inefficient. You don't want fish today, but I need a basket.
Yeah.
So human beings interact, and through necessity, we invent a concept to solve the friction.
Okay.
We decide that these specific shiny cowrie shells represent abstract value. We externalize a mental concept onto a physical object. It is a purely creative, conscious act.
We know we made it up. It's just a tool we agreed to use to make life easier.
Right. But then comes step two, objectification. Time passes. Generations go by. The use of shells becomes highly complex. We build accounting systems, we create debt structures, we establish a centralized treasury to manage the shells.
The original concept detaches from the specific individuals who invented it.
It institutionalizes. It becomes a massive, rigid system. It becomes an object in the world that exerts massive force over how the tribe operates.
And then the final, crucial step.
Step three, internalization. Fast forward a few centuries, a child is born into this society. That child looks around. They don't know the history of the island. They weren't there when their ancestors arbitrarily pointed at a shell.
To that child, the value of the shell is an undeniable fact of the universe.
It is as objective and real to them as the rain falling from the sky or the gravity holding them to the ground. They internalize the socially constructed truth as a fundamental reality.
And we do this with almost every pillar of human existence. We do it with the concept of marriage, the concept of a nation state with arbitrary borders, the concept of a corporation.
Even the concept of the weekend.
Yes. The universe does not recognize a Saturday. The noumenon does not have a weekend. But we constructed it, objectified it, and now our entire biological rhythms and economic lives are dictated by it. It feels real.
And this leads us to what might be the single most powerful rule in the study of sociology. It is known as the W.I. Thomas theorem. It was formulated in the late 1920s, and it provides the linchpin for how constructed truths dominate physical reality.
What does the theorem state?
The theorem states, if men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences.
Let me say that again, because that is basically the thesis statement of human history. If men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences.
Let's break down the mechanics of how terrifyingly effective this theorem is. The classic sociological example is a bank run. Let's say there is a local bank. In physical reality, in the ledgers and the vaults, the bank is perfectly healthy. It has great investments. It is entirely financially stable.
So the ontological reality is stability.
Yes. But a completely unfounded rumor begins to spread through the town that the bank is insolvent and about to collapse. The rumor is a fiction. It is an anti-truth. It has zero correspondence to the reality of the ledgers.
But the Thomas theorem kicks in.
Exactly. Because the townspeople define the rumor as real in their minds, they act on it. They panic. They all rush to the bank on the same morning and demand to withdraw all their money in cash.
And because of fractional reserve banking, no bank on earth holds 100% of its deposits in liquid cash at all times.
So the bank cannot meet the sudden massive withdrawal demand. It runs out of cash, it defaults, and it goes bankrupt.
And there it is. The collapse of the bank becomes a physical, undeniable, devastating reality. The employees lose their jobs, the building is boarded up. A completely false belief in the minds of the people generated an intensely real consequence in the physical world.
The map actively changed the territory. The human mind isn't just a passive observer trying to navigate reality. Collective belief has the sheer kinetic power to manifest subjective truths into objective consequences.
We see this today with the stock market constantly. Look at the GameStop short squeeze phenomenon from a few years ago.
A perfect example.
The real financial fundamentals of the company didn't suddenly justify a massive stock price explosion, but a collective, socially coordinated belief on internet forums defined the situation as a historic squeeze. Millions of people acted on that belief, and the massive financial consequences for hedge funds became blisteringly real.
It's the Thomas theorem in action.
I want to pause here and throw a direct question out to you, the listener. Think about the architecture of your own life. Think about the milestones you are striving for, the anxieties keeping you awake at night, the structures of your daily routine. How many of your absolute unshakable truths are actually just neurological models built by a brain taking shortcuts?
It's a tough question.
And how many are just invisible social contracts, like the prestige of a certain brand or the timeline of a career ladder that you have inherited and internalized, completely forgetting that someone, somewhere, just made them up? It is a dizzying, slightly unmooring thought.
It is profound, but it becomes exponentially more dangerous when we bring this cycle into the present day. Because if reality is socially constructed through slow consensus, what happens when powerful technology allows malicious actors to hijack, accelerate, and manipulate that construction process on a global scale?
And that chilling question brings us to the next phase of our exploration. We are stepping out of the theoretical past and into the digital present, the post-truth era, echo chambers, and the mechanics of modern deception.
The research here introduces a contemporary theory that perfectly updates Berger and Luckman for the internet age. It's called the digital crystallization model by researchers Won and Bo.
Right. Won and Bo recognize that the social construction cycle, which used to take generations of slow institutionalization, has been supercharged by the architecture of the internet. Today, inventing a reality doesn't take centuries.
It takes hours. Their digital crystallization model explains that the metrics we interact with every day online, likes, shares, retweets, upvotes, are not passive measurements of public opinion, they are active manufacturing tools.
Explain how that crystallization actually works. How does a tweet become a truth?
Imagine a highly subjective, emotionally charged, and factually dubious claim is posted in a specific online community, an echo chamber. Because algorithms are designed to maximize engagement, and because human brains are wired to react to outrage and in-group validation, the algorithm aggressively boosts this claim.
Makes sense.
As the post accumulates tens of thousands of likes and shares, those numbers act as overwhelming social proof to the human brain.
It's the digital equivalent of seeing 10,000 white swans.
Exactly. The sheer volume of engagement bypasses our critical faculties. The subjective claim rapidly hardens it, crystallizes into an objective, undeniable reality for the members of that group. The metric of popularity entirely replaces the metric of truth. If 1 million people shared it, our tribal brains tell us it must correspond to reality.
And this directly echoes the warnings of the French philosopher Jean Baudrillard. The sources bring up his concept of hyperreality, which feels like he was looking into a crystal ball when he wrote it.
Baudrillard was incredibly prescient. He argued that in an age dominated by mass media and endless simulation, the simulation eventually becomes more real to us than the underlying reality it was meant to represent.
The copy replaces the original.
Yes. We react to the trending hashtag, the curated Instagram aesthetic, or the heavily edited news clip, rather than the complex, boring, untelevised reality of the actual event. We become so obsessed with the map that we forget the territory even exists.
Which brings us to the defining buzzword of our current societal moment, the post-truth era.
The term was actually first coined by a playwright, Steve Tessick, back in 1992, but the author Ralph Keyes vastly expanded on the mechanics of it in his work.
We are currently living in a landscape where an individual's feelings, their personal beliefs, and their tribal identity matter significantly more in shaping public opinion than any objective facts.
Keyes offers a masterful, granular analysis of how this happened. He points out that the danger of the post-truth era isn't simply that people are telling more lies. Humans have always lied.
Yeah.
The unique danger of our era is that the very boundary separating honesty from lying has been completely erased. We have systematically normalized deception to such a degree that we've had to invent a whole new linguistic category to make ourselves feel better about it.
Keyes calls it the third category of lies.
The soft lies. The euphemisms we use so we don't have to look in the mirror and call ourselves liars.
Exactly. We no longer admit to lying. We say we misstated the facts. We exaggerated. We engaged in spin. We offered alternative facts.
Keyes breaks this third category down into specific subcategories. And when you look at the list, it is a devastating indictment of how modern society dilutes truth to avoid the friction of reality.
Let's walk through these because reading the source material, I instantly recognized every single one of these tactics from corporate press releases, political campaigns, and honestly, daily conversations.
Let's dissect them. The first is what Keyes calls enhanced truth. This is when a person takes a microscopic kernel of actual reality and inflates it to absurd proportions to strengthen a narrative.
Like a politician taking a tiny, statistically insignificant dip in the unemployment rate and declaring on television that their minor policy tweak has created the greatest, most unprecedented economic boom in the history of civilization.
Exactly. The foundational number might be slightly positive, but the narrative, the truth they are selling, is enhanced beyond any recognizable correspondence to reality.
Second is neo-truth. This is fascinating because it's the engine of the internet. This involves replacing old, boring facts with highly compelling, fictional new narratives.
This is the breeding ground of modern conspiracy theories. A neo-truth usually lacks any hard evidence, but it feels like it should be true. It perfectly aligns with the anxieties or prejudices of a specific group.
So they adopt it as a neo-truth, completely unbothered by the lack of empirical proof. The emotional resonance replaces the need for correspondence.
Then we have the corporate favorite, soft truth. This is the strategic use of linguistic padding and clinical jargon to drastically reduce the emotional impact of a brutal reality.
The corporation doesn't issue a memo saying they are doing mass layoffs and destroying the livelihoods of 5,000 families. They announce they're undergoing a strategic restructuring, a synergistic realignment, or a right-sizing of the workforce.
It sanitizes the violence of reality.
Completely. It obscures the human cost behind a veil of sterile management speak.
The fourth category is faux truth. This is completely fabricated information that is deliberately dressed up in the authoritative aesthetics of truth. You see this constantly in marketing.
Think of a commercial selling a dubious dietary supplement. They will put an actor in a pristine white lab coat, standing in front of a fake laboratory background, pointing to a computer-generated bar graph moving upward.
It wears the costume of the scientific method, but there is absolutely no rigorous falsifiability or reality behind it. It just looks like truth.
And finally, the most common everyday deception, truth light. This is strategic cherry picking. You present only the specific fragments of reality that make you look flawless, and you aggressively omit everything else.
The classic example is resume padding or social media curation. You highlight the one successful project you led, but you conveniently hide the fact that you were removed from your position for incompetence a month later.
You are building a map that only shows the scenic routes and erases all the swamps.
Exactly.
Now, reading through this list of modern deceptions, it's easy to get incredibly cynical and think social media ruined us. But the sources point out that this instinct to soften, bend, and manipulate the truth is not a new phenomenon. There are incredibly deep historical and biological roots driving this behavior.
It is practically embedded in our DNA. Historically, one of the most intellectually fascinating examples of formalizing deception comes from the Catholic Reformation, with the concept of mental reservation.
I found this part of the research completely mind-blowing. It's the ultimate theological loophole. Explain how this worked.
During periods of intense, bloody religious persecution, like the Inquisition or the conflicts in Elizabethan England, theologians faced a massive ethical crisis. Their religion explicitly commanded them never to lie, as truth was sacred to God.
Right.
But telling the truth to interrogators would result in their execution or the betrayal of their fellow believers. So they developed the doctrine of mental reservation. They argued that if you were forced to speak to an unjust interrogator, you could make a highly misleading or seemingly false statement out loud, as long as you secretly completed the actual truthful sentence in your own mind.
So you speak a lie to the room, but you think the truth to yourself.
Exactly. The complex theological logic was that God, being omniscient, hears both the spoken words and the internal thoughts as one complete sentence. Therefore, you are technically presenting the full truth to God while successfully deceiving your mortal enemy.
Wow.
You remain completely sinless, your soul is safe, but you survive the interrogation.
It is the ultimate intellectualization of, I had my fingers crossed behind my back. It is brilliant. And it shows how early humans were desperate to find a way to maintain the purity of absolute truth while utilizing the practical utility of a lie.
But if we go even deeper than history, if we go to biology, the evolutionary historian Jeremy Campbell argues that deception isn't a theological loophole at all. It is a fundamental biological survival mechanism.
Campbell looks at the natural world and points out that deception is everywhere. It is how nature operates.
Think of camouflage. An insect evolving to look exactly like a dead leaf so a bird doesn't eat it. Or mimicry, a completely harmless snake evolving the exact color patterns of a highly venomous coral snake to terrify predators.
The animal kingdom thrives by projecting false realities. Evolutionary success often depends on your ability to deceive the environment.
And Campbell's argument is that human beings are animals. We inherited this biological imperative. We use deception, whether it's enhanced truth to get a mate or truth light on a resume to secure resources, because millions of years of evolution have programmed us to do whatever it takes to survive and gain status.
And we see society actively reward this. The sources point to high-profile modern cases of massive reality manipulation.
Look at the journalist Jason Blair, who fabricated dozens of major stories for a national newspaper. He wasn't just lying. He was constructing hyper-realities that readers found more compelling than the boring truth.
Or the Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Joseph Ellis, who was caught completely inventing a dramatic history of his own military service in Vietnam. Why did he do it? To enhance his status and authority in the classroom. He needed his personal truth to be more heroic than his reality.
Or even on a socially accepted level. Think of branding. Think of Ralph Lifshitz, a kid from the Bronx, completely obscuring his background to reinvent himself as the epitome of elite, aristocratic American fashion under the name Ralph Lauren.
Or Martha Stewart meticulously curating an empire of effortless, unattainable domestic perfection that hid the chaotic reality of actual life. Society doesn't just tolerate constructed truths. We constantly reward the compelling lie over the mundane reality.
You throw our money at the hyper-reality.
Yeah. Okay, I have to step in here and play the ultimate pragmatist. I have to push back on the moral panic. Let's synthesize this. If evolution programmed us to deceive for survival, if the harmless snake needs to lie to live, and if our society constantly relies on soft truths so we don't brutally offend each other every day,
Right.
and if truth light is required just to get an interview, is lying really that bad? If an enhanced truth gets you the job and you end up doing great work, or a soft truth prevents a panic during a corporate transition, isn't that just practical utility? Why do we need to cling to some strict, unbending devotion to objective, absolute truth?
That is the ultimate Machiavellian pragmatist argument. The ends justify the means, and the map just needs to get me to the destination.
Exactly.
But to answer that, to understand the devastating flaw in that logic, we must return to the moral anchor of our entire deep dive. We have to bring back Immanuel Kant.
Kant.
We discussed his epistemology earlier, the head said and the noumenon, but his work on ethics is even more severe, and it provides the ultimate counter-argument to the post-truth mindset.
Kant was absolutely uncompromising when it came to ethics.
He was a moral absolutist. Kant formulated his famous categorical imperative. He argued that lying, any form of deception, big or small, malicious or well-intentioned, is fundamentally categorically wrong in every single instance, period.
Even a white lie to spare someone's feelings.
Even then, why? Because Kant's ethics are not based on the immediate outcome of the lie. He doesn't care if the lie makes everyone feel better in the short term.
Okay.
Kant argues that human civilization is a fragile architecture built on one single, invisible foundation, the assumption of shared truth. The social contract, the legal system, global commerce, the concept of human rights, the ability to walk down the street without assuming everyone is trying to murder you, all of it requires a baseline of trust.
We have to believe that the words other people say have some correspondence to reality.
Exactly. Kant argues that when you lie, even if you think it's a harmless, soft truth, you aren't just deceiving one person in one isolated moment. You are injecting a poison into the well of human communication. You are attacking the very concept of human dignity and autonomy because you are denying another human being the right to make decisions based on reality.
You are trapping them in your fake map.
Yes. And Kant's terrifying warning is this. If we accept the pragmatist argument, if society collectively decides that reality is malleable, that truth is just whatever serves your immediate tribal needs or survival instincts, the foundation crumbles. Society collapses.
If no one can trust the map, cooperation becomes impossible. We regress into raw tribalism where the only metric that matters is power. He who has the most power forces his hallucination onto everyone else. Truth protects us from tyranny.
That's exactly what he's saying.
That is a profound, chilling moral warning. It is a reminder that while our biology might urge us to use camouflage like a snake, our humanity, our civilization, demands that we fight that instinct and pursue the truth.
Beautifully said.
But having explored the dark, manipulative side of subjective reality, I want to pivot the conversation, because our research doesn't end on a cynical note. We move to the final phase of our deep dive: art, law, and the divine.
Because in very specific, highly formalized human institutions, deliberately manipulating reality is not a deceptive poison. It is actually a noble, profound pursuit.
It is the paradox of human culture. There are domains where fiction is the only vehicle capable of delivering absolute truth. Let's look at art and literature.
Think about reading a massive, sweeping novel, a masterpiece like Tolstoy's War and Peace or Toni Morrison's Beloved. When you open those books, you know that factually, everything on the page is false.
Right.
The events never occurred in the physical noumenon, the dialogue was never spoken, the characters never had physical mass. The book has zero ontological reality.
It is a complete fabrication.
But when you read it, it breaks your heart. It makes you cry.
Yeah.
It changes how you view your own family. It rearranges your internal moral compass. Why? Because while it lacks reality, it contains deep, universal truths about human nature. It reveals the truth of grief, the anatomy of ambition, the complexity of love.
The Greek philosopher Aristotle recognized this specific power over 2 millennia ago, didn't he?
Yes, Aristotle made a fascinating claim in his Poetics. He stated that poetry, and by extension, all fictional art, is actually more philosophical and more profound than history.
That sounds counterintuitive. Why is poetry more profound than a historical record of reality?
Because, Aristotle argued, history only tells us what did happen. It is trapped in the specific, messy, chaotic reality of singular events. It tells you what one specific general did on one specific Tuesday.
Right.
But poetry tells us what could happen or what ought to happen. It strips away the distracting, chaotic noise of specific reality to isolate the universal essence of the human condition. Art removes the messy facts to give us a pure, distilled dose of truth.
Pablo Picasso captured this perfectly when he famously declared, "Art is a lie that makes us realize truth."
That is so elegant. The lie removes the static so we can hear the signal.
Now, what about the institution of the law? This one is tricky because a courtroom seems like the one place on earth that should be violently obsessed with pure, unvarnished reality. But the sources show that the legal system actually has to make a massive philosophical compromise.
It does. The justice system is highly practical, and it recognizes the limits of human epistemology. So, jurisprudence explicitly separates the world into 2 categories: material reality and formal reality.
Define material reality first.
Material reality is the raw noumenon. It is what actually physically occurred in the world. Who stood exactly where in the alleyway? The exact sequence of words spoken, the precise trajectory of the action.
But the legal system is deeply aware that it can never, ever perfectly access that material reality. Witnesses have flawed memories, as we discussed. Evidence degrades, people lie, the past is gone.
The court can never take off the Kantian headset. So what is the solution?
The solution is formal reality, also known as procedural truth. Formal reality is the narrative that the court can actually prove based on strict, predefined rules of evidence and procedure.
Think about it. A judge might sit on the bench and personally, internally believe they know the material reality. They might suspect the defendant is guilty. But if the murder weapon was obtained through an illegal police search without a warrant, that reality must be entirely excluded from the trial.
The physical reality of the weapon is erased from the legal map.
Exactly. The jury must render a verdict based exclusively on the formal reality presented within the rules. The legal system accepts that it cannot access perfect, God-like reality, so it settles for a just, rigorous process.
It creates a highly structured, artificial environment to get as close to the truth as humanly possible while accepting its phenomenal limits. The law values the integrity of the process over the absolute retrieval of reality.
Which finally brings us to the highest, most abstract framework of all, theology and mysticism. How do religious traditions handle this massive split between the physical world and the truth?
In theology, truth breaks free from just being a mental concept and takes on its most expansive cosmic meaning. Look at Islamic philosophical theology, for example. One of the primary names of God is Allah, which translates directly to the truth or the real.
The Arabic root we talked about in the very beginning.
Yes. In this framework, truth is no longer just a linguistic formula, like Tarski's snow is white. Truth is not just a sentence's accuracy. Truth is the ultimate originating source of all existence.
The physical world, the planets, the oceans, the reality we touch is viewed as merely a temporary, fleeting manifestation of that eternal, divine truth. Reality is just the shadow cast by the truth.
And the sources mention the mystical tradition of Sufism, which approaches this with intense experiential focus.
In Sufi mysticism, truth isn't data. It isn't a theological doctrine you memorize from a book. It is a spiritual destination. The entire mystic's journey is a deliberate, arduous practice of piercing the veil of the material world.
It is the attempt to look past the illusions of physical reality, past your own ego and attachments, to reach union with the divine truth underneath. It is an experiential, transformative journey, not just an intellectual puzzle.
That's beautifully said.
Okay, let me try to weave these 3 institutions together because looking at them side by side provides a stunning map of the human spirit. If we look at art, art is a deliberate lie that tells the truth. If we look at the courtroom, it is a desperate search for truth that is strictly limited by the rules of reality. And if we look at theology, it is the profound, soaring belief that truth is infinitely larger and older than physical reality.
That synthesis shows exactly why we need both concepts. It demonstrates the incredible versatility and the absolute necessity of balancing the physical and the conceptual in the human experience.
Which brings us to the final summation of our incredible journey today. From the ancient shepherds carving notches into wood, to the tribal oaths of loyalty, from the shadows of Plato's cave to Kant's inescapable headset.
From Karl Popper's destructive black swans to the algorithmic hyperreality of our modern digital echo chambers. Where does all of this research leave us? What is the final takeaway?
It leaves us with a profound, almost beautiful realization about our species. Human beings are the only creatures on this planet that are forced to straddle two different universes simultaneously.
We physically, biologically live in reality. We bleed, we age, we are bound by gravity.
But spiritually, morally, and intellectually, we reside entirely in truth. We are the bridge between the silent, meaningless atoms of the cosmos and the desperate, meaning-making power of consciousness.
We are trying to make the play match the stage.
Always. And the tension between the two, the heartbreaking fact that our mental truths never perfectly seamlessly match the physical reality, isn't a biological flaw.
No, that gap, that unending friction between what is and what we know, is the very energy source of humanity. It is what makes us build microscopes, write symphonies, draft constitutions, and strive for justice.
If we perfectly instantly grasped reality like gods, we would be entirely static. We would have no reason to move. The gap is what keeps us seeking.
That is a brilliant way to view it. The friction isn't a failure, it's the engine.
And that leads me to a final provocative thought I want to leave you, the listener, with today. Something to turn over in your mind long after you take your headphones off. The next time you find yourself in a deeply heated argument with someone, whether it's a massive debate about national politics, a painful conflict in your relationship, or just a ridiculous fight over how the dishwasher should be loaded, take a breath, stop, and ask yourself a structural question.
What's the question?
Are you actually arguing over what is objectively real in the physical world? Or are you violently clashing over your constructed truths? Are you fighting over the terrain of the territory, or are you just holding two completely different socially constructed maps? If you can identify the difference in that moment of anger, you might just find the grace required to bridge the gap.
A vital, necessary question for the era we are living in.
Don't forget to follow us and subscribe to stay updated on our latest episodes and never miss a step in this odyssey of thought. Until next time, keep questioning.